Good. All right, I think we got everybody's at a seat. I welcome those to the March 15th Wasatch Front Economic Development District Committee. Appreciate your attendance. I'm Commissioner Gage Farr. I'll be chairing this afternoon. I'm going to start with introductions. Let's start first with introductions here in the room, and then Rosie will do the online introductions and make sure we have everybody on the roll call. So we'll start down here on my left. You wouldn't mind just introduce yourself and who you represent.
I'm Ryan England representing Better City.
Eric Gibson representing Better City.
Rena Kittleson with Better City.
Alan Packard with Jordan Valley Water Conservancy District.
Aaron Brush, Davis Technical College.
Kyle Palmer, just a guest, but with the Governor's Office of Economic Opportunity.
Ginger Chin with the Salt Lake Chamber.
Muriel Sochmel with X Factor Strategic Communications.
Kent Anderson, Davis County.
Ryan Starks, Governor's Office of Economic Opportunity.
Marsha White, Wasatch Front Regional Council.
Hi, I'm Andrew Gruber. I'm Executive Director here at Wasatch Front Regional Council. Welcome, everybody.
Ted Knowlton, I'm the Deputy Director at WFRC.
Jevin Gibbs, Salt Lake County.
Megan Townsend, Community and Economic Development Director, Wasatch Front Regional Council.
Elvon Farrell with EDC Utah.
Rosie Hernandez with WFRC. And online we have Aniza Brown, Blaine Fackrell, Brad Mortensen, Carrie Fullerton, Chris Lone, Eric Gibson, James, I don't have a last name, Jason Godfrey, Jordan Chandler, Jory Johnner, Karen Lang, Mayor Debbie Nguyen, Michaela Jordan, Mike Subchak, Nikki Navio, Randy Elliott, Sarah Lawless, and T. Hoffman. That's all I see. If you just came in after the roll call, please drop your name in the chat for the record. Back to you, Chair.
Thank you, Rosie. So let's start with some house cleaning items we need to do. So based upon the WFEDD bylaws, we are required every year, I guess every 2 years, to make sure that we approve of the members and the chairs and vice chairs. I honored to have Mayor Nguyen also be the vice chair for this coming year. She's done a great job for us this past period of time. So we're fortunate to have her on board. So what I would do is look for, and I think those committee names are online. You can check those out. There hasn't been a substantial change in new members. And if you're online and here, you probably know who that you're on that list. So first off, I would look to entertain a motion for the district appointments for the committee members that are online. So I'd look for a motion and then a second, we can approve those committee members that have been submitted.
You can vote for yourself.
Yeah, we don't have to wait for somebody outside to come in and vote, so.
Elvon.
Do you just need a motion to approve?
Just a motion to approve.
So moved.
Thank you. We have a motion. Do we have a second?
I'll second it.
And we have a second. Thank you for that. I'm going to call for the motion. All those in favor, please say aye.
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 Anybody
Aye.
opposed? Thank you. That motion carries. Let's now go to the appointments for the chair and vice chair. Again, I've been nominated by the WFRC to be the chair for this committee for the coming year, and Mayor Nguyen has been nominated to be the vice chair. And I'd look for a motion to approve the chair and vice chair appointments as recommended by the WFRC committee. We have a motion. Ginger Chin. We have a second? All right, we got a second. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries. We're now going to look for the approval of the minutes from our last meeting, which was held December 14th, 2022. You should have a copy of those minutes in your agenda. If, I don't know if there's one attached, but I think everybody's had an opportunity to review those minutes. If so, I'd entertain a motion to approve the minutes from that meeting.
Motion to approve the minutes?
Can we have a motion to approve the minutes? Do we have a second? And we have a second. Seeing no discussion, all those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? I'm going to rule the motion carries. Thank you very much.
And Chair, just real quick, all of those minutes and information from the last meeting are usually sent out in an email. So it also comes in a packet.
Yeah, yeah. If you check your email, they definitely will be there. Yeah, yeah. If you see something coming in from Rosie, you probably want to open it up because it could be your minutes or agendas or some important information from this committee. So thank you very much. So what we've done is ratified the appointments for the committee. We've ratified the committee chair and vice chair, and we've taken action to ratify or approve the minutes from the December 14th. I think that takes care of our business. Let's now go to the chair's report. Just a couple of small items that I need to report on. If you remember, December 14th seems like a long period of time ago. And depending on how involved you were with the legislature, it was a long time ago. I think some people would agree with that. But I just wanted to thank, I think Andrew would definitely agree with that. I just wanted to thank everybody. We talked about the statewide SIDS at that point in time. We had a great participation from this committee and other people in the state through the governor's office and other areas. I think that's been proven to be a very successful endeavor that we're undertaking. So just appreciate your involvement, participation in that 5-year plan. I think for those that were involved with that discussion in December, I think we came away with some highlights that probably didn't surprise us a lot, but gave us information that substantiated really what we should look for in some of these regional areas and what we're doing on an economic development basis in the state. So I look forward to that. The other thing I want to report on is I think we've all heard about the EDA grants in the past. I know Marsh has done a good job of keeping us informed of that. From what I understand, there's a new grant available for infrastructure. And what else would that cover, Marcia?
It covers construction and non-construction projects. It covers technical assistance. It covers planning. It covers a lot of different things. And so they just released their new EDA funding for this coming year. They have a weird fiscal year. But if you have some ideas or economic development related type ideas, let me know. I can help and put you in touch with the EDA. But their new funding came through I think it'll be probably April 1st, but
Do we have know the amount of funding available?
I don't know
in that
that.
program?
No, I don't know.
Okay.
I don't know exactly. It's by region and it usually is around 15 to $20 million
That's
that
what I
they
said.
have.
Yeah, and for those cities, counties, districts that may have a use for this, again, infrastructure and construction are allowed under this. There's no deadlines, from what I understand, for submission. I know up in Weber County, we now have actively put in, I think, for 2 or 3 of these EDA grants. We're still waiting to hear back. So again, this is money available on something that's very crucial to economic development in this state, which is infrastructure. Then obviously the construction projects to advance what we want to see happening in our cities and counties. So just be aware of that.
It also can fund, I don't know if anybody has revolving loan funds. I don't know if the county does or not, but it can also fund or refund those.
Correct, right. So any questions on that? Get with Marcia. She's the expert. She can lead you in the right direction and, take advantage of those grants. It's a lot easier sometimes to get these sources of funds that are already programmed for construction, infrastructure, et cetera, than try to go out and look at other capital silos. Andrew?
Mr. Chair, just in routine course, Marcia and Rosie after this meeting is over, will send out an email giving you links to any of the information presented or talked about, including the EDA funding that's available.
Right, good. Yeah, thank you very much. Okay, so that covers EDA. Now we're to the public comment section of our agenda. Anyone online that would like to make a comment, or anybody in the board room that members of the public that would like to make a comment? Now's your opportunity to speak before the committee. I don't see anybody jumping at it, so we're going to go ahead and move on. Let's now go to our economic development 2023 legislative update. We have a couple of key people here that were very involved this year. Andrew Gruber, I know, was up at the Capitol probably every day, if not more, just about, and kept us informed of what was going on with the transportation funding, as well as other areas that became very hot topics, even in the last week. Probably
Even the
night.
last day, even the last
Yeah.
night of session. Yes.
Sometimes that can happen. Anyways, so we saw a substantial amount of legislation come down, a lot of funding, a record budget this year, and a lot of money went into different areas that I think that will benefit cities and some of these special districts and counties as we kind of resolve or make sure we understand what the legislation does and the appropriations. It always takes a little while to settle down after the legislative session just to figure out exactly what we're dealing with. But we're fortunate to have Ginger Chin with us from the Salt Lake Chamber. She was also actively involved with the legislative session. So Ginger, do you want to take the first whack at this? You got a presentation to make? Okay, thank you, Ginger.
We're going to get you a mic.
I have to carry this around like this, right? So again, Ginger Chin, Vice President of Public Policy and Government Affairs at the Salt Lake Chamber. And I'm going to talk a little bit about economic development, but I think I just want to talk overview, and Gage touched on it. This was an interesting session, and I was trying to kind of wrap my head around it as we were in it, and then now as we wrapped it up. And I think it's fascinating when you have a really skilled Speaker of the House and a really skilled President of the Senate. I would say this was a very strategic session. They had strategy going into it. They had strategy throughout, and ultimately came out with a solid session. And we ended early. I think it was 10:24 as we were walking out the door, and I felt like I had my life back, which was fantastic. So there were 575 bills passed, $29 billion budget, which is a record amount of money that was spent this year. And 575 bills, that was a huge year for this session. And I started to do some math. I'm like, that's a little over 5 bills per legislator. That seems not so crazy when you put it in those terms. One thing, and I think Andrew, actually, we came up with this in one of our legislative meetings during this session. It felt like the entire session was geared towards preparing for Utah's growth. That's really seemed to be the theme. This is an unofficial theme, but with growth comes cultural shifts and changes. And it felt like every bill, every conversation is around, wow, we are changing, we are growing, and there's a lot of growth. And how do we address that? Whether it's added infrastructure dollars, which I know you're going to address, Andrew, on the transportation front, banner year for education, but also cultural shifts. So as we hit the session out of the gate, there were some big bills. I mean, we hit education, House Bill 215, which was the education funding for school, I don't dare say vouchers, but the scholarship program, and wait for pupil unit, or excuse me, changes to teacher salaries. And so that went out right through the gate, as well as some transgender bills, which usually those linger around during the session, but this was boom, right out of the gate. So every year, and I'm talking from the chamber's perspective, not necessarily economic development, but arguably almost every bill seems to be an economic development bill in some form or fashion. But every year leading up to the session, we have a series of meetings with our stakeholders where we determine our legislative priorities, and housing was one of our top priorities. And so out of that, we supported 2 of the Commission on Housing Affordability bills, one out of the Senate, one out of the House, that were companion bills that impacted cities by quite a bit. It was geared towards moderate to income housing plans and how cities are going to plan for moderate to income housing, as well as fees that could be assessed if you were not meeting your moderate to income housing plan goals. And I listed these 2. These ultimately go to our board, our executive board, where they vote on whether these are priority bills or not. And they voted on these 2 bills to be priority bills. And because jobs equal housing and housing equal jobs. We really see housing, affordable housing across the entire state, not just along the Wasatch Front, as economic development drivers and a workforce development issue. I think we talked about housing, House Bill 499, or maybe it was just Kent, you and I talked about it. This was a bill that we ultimately supported. Homelessness and the unsheltered is a huge problem for the Salt Lake Chamber as well as our businesses. We hear about it on a regular basis. We have numerous meetings on an ongoing basis. So House Bill 499 actually became one of our priorities. I know it became almost, hey, Utah County, Davis County, we'd like to see you come up with a plan for what they're calling, code blue when it's cold. And I even heard during this session there was going to be a code red. I don't think that eventually made it into the bill for high temperatures in St. George or Washington County or other counties that experience high temperatures to deal with overflow shelters to help the unsheltered. Ultimately, Salt Lake City tends to bear the brunt of a lot of the homeless issues as they migrate to resources. And so we felt like this was a positive bill for economic development across the state as it talks about unsheltered throughout the state. Workforce development. One of the bills that we got behind is House Bill 555, Talent Ready Utah modifications. What this bill ultimately does is it provides worker compensation and coverage for high school students who are wanting to take advantage of apprenticeship programs. There's a lot of opportunities for apprenticeship models, but if you are an aerospace company or a machining company, your workers' compensation doesn't cover high school students coming in. So this one we really felt was a positive step in the right direction to get students into apprenticeship programs early on, and ultimately a workforce bill that we really were proud of and got behind. It also creates an apprenticeship director, I suppose you would call it, under the Talent Ready Utah model to connect employers with these workforce in high schools. I'm going to cruise by these. I know you touch on these, Andrew, but these were two of our priority bills, Senate Bill 125 and Senate Bill 185. And I know Wasatch Front did a stellar job promoting these, and I know you'll get into them, but these were two of the Chamber's priority bills that our board really felt like we needed to support. On economic development, and I know that's kind of the topic du jour, we were really excited about House Bill 42. If you all remember, USTAR, Utah Science, Technology, and Research, was a state agency that was rolled up and unwound a few years ago. With that, there's a fund called the Fund of Funds. It's $150 million that's been sitting in some capital opportunities. House Bill 42 allows universities, respectively Utah State, University of Utah, to take advantage of those funds and provide a fund for seed venture early stage investment. So this is a bill and it'll be housed at the point of the mountain, right, Mariel? So this is one that we really felt was a positive step in the right direction for entrepreneurship and innovation across the state of Utah. This one, kind of a weird one, House Bill 216 Chancery Court Amendments. This is, so in the state of Utah, this was modeled after Delaware. What's interesting about this is that if a business were to go to court on any business related item, they get rolled into just a general court system, and our judges and our courts may not have business expertise. So this creates a standalone business court where a lot of the business issues that get litigated or pushed through courts will go through this court system. And that one was funded and one that we got behind. A little bit unique for us to get behind this, but we did feel like it was a help for our businesses. And now I'm going to talk about a couple of bills that we're working on now. They were presented and ultimately did not pass. House Bill 407, incentive amendments. This is by Representative Kay Christopherson. And Representative Christopherson brings forward this bill, or a version of this bill, almost every year. This bill actually would roll out solar and wind tax credits, R&D tax credits, recycling tax credits, and we require those companies taking advantage of tax credits to have a forward-facing full disclosure transparency, and that would happen through Go Utah. So we felt that with the transparency issues, it was going to create a little bit of an issue for our businesses because that all of a sudden the competition can see what's happening in the state of Utah. So we came out and we opposed this bill and are now working with the sponsor on how we can come back next year with some better opportunities that would be more business friendly. this is, I think, the sixth year that this bill has come around, and he refines it year over year. So I wouldn't be surprised if we saw it in our seventh time. I won't get into healthcare. We did this bill. I took a ton of time on prescription cost amendments, and I won't waste your time on too much on it, but needless to say, this was a cost transfer from patient prescriptions to businesses. And we had our business community come out and force against this bill. And this bill was ultimately did not pass, but something that we'll be working on in the interim. And I'll get into that just a little bit. Okay, so ESG, I want to talk about that real quickly. Environmental, social, and governance. This bill probably took up more time than I care to admit. There were multiple bills that were anti-ESG, and if you're not familiar with ESG initiatives, so at the federal level, the Biden administration has come down with coming to financial institutions and corporations to move forward environmental goals, greenhouse gas emissions, anti-fossil fuels, social issues, diversity, equity, and inclusion, and governance at board level. And business has the choice to make their full decisions on how they want to do business. I think that's ultimately, let's keep the government out of our back pockets here and off our backs. But a lot of our legislators felt that these bills were government overreach, or that ESG essentially is overreach, and they don't like that. So there were a series of anti-ESG bills that ultimately would have some consequences upon the state of Utah that we successfully were working to change some of the verbiage so they were more business friendly. We worked a lot with the governor's office and got some of the DEI stuff removed out of those bills so they were more business friendly. So I'll give you an example. Senate Bill 97. If any company were to do business with a public entity, so you think public entity, that's state, city, universities, they would need to self-certify that they are not an economic boycotter and they don't do business with economic boycotters, which seems fine. But when you start to think about Delta Airlines signs a contract with Salt Lake City to have an airport, and Delta Airlines had an economic boycott against the state of Georgia, that creates a problem. Or Disney had an economic boycott in the state of Florida, that creates a problem for our film incentives, or it could. And so we were able to work some of the verbiage where we were able to get those to a better place, but we'll still be working on a lot of the anti-ESG moving forward. Any questions? I'm moving pretty quickly. Okay. So next steps, and then I'll wrap it up and turn it over to Andrew. Because a lot of issues were kicked to interim, I think more so than I've ever heard in any other legislative session than I have in the past, we'll work on that in interim. We'll do that. Well, let's have an interim study. Let's kick that to interim. I heard that over and over again. And so because of that, we're forming several working groups, and we certainly encourage participation in working groups to be a little bit more proactive versus reactive. We don't want to play defense all legislative session. We want to be in a place where we have great conversations leading into the interim session as well into our general legislative session. So just really quickly, we are working on prescription drugs. I know that's a passion of everybody in this room. Incentives and its impacts to Utah, talent development and recruitment, workforce development. We're talking about diversity, equity, inclusion. There was one bill, Senate Bill 283, that came out at the very end of the session, which prohibited higher education institutions from having a diversity, equity, and inclusion officer or department in higher ed. It doesn't sound necessarily problematic, although it does sound very problematic, but to some they're like, oh, let's not spend that money. There was a high allocation. They did an analysis. I think it was $13 million to DEI. But you can imagine that would take away our accreditation. That would take our ability to get federal financial aid. So University of Utah without an accredited medical school, that's problematic to our economy. So we're working on some of those higher ed bills related to DEI. And federal priorities. Every year we go to Washington, D.C. We take about 80 businesses to Washington, D.C. to talk about federal initiatives. And so we'll be working on our federal priorities with working groups as well. So I think that's it. Any questions?
Any questions for Ginger? Go ahead.
Ginger, for HB 42, did you say 150 million or 15 million?
It's actually $150 million, and it's part of the fund of funds that was put into a separate bank account years ago, and it's been sitting there.
How much? I thought the Innovation Lab got a $15 million fund.
The Innovation Lab got a $50 million fund. This is separate. Yeah.
Okay. Cool. All right. No,
And this
$150
is not,
million.
it's not out of the general fund. It's been there for a long time. Yeah, this funding has been there for a while. It's not out of the general fund. So you're talking about general fund money.
Okay, that makes sense.
That
Because
makes
$50
totally
million
different. Two buckets,
is
yeah.
a couple pennies when you're doing venture capital, whereas $150 million can go further.
Exactly. And it's two different buckets. So
Awesome.
Additional questions? Cool. So Ginger, I'm going to put you on the hot spot here. So you talked about the bills that you opposed that didn't get passed.
yeah.
It's always interesting to hear about those that you opposed or we consider to be not in our best business interest for economic development. Did any bills pass that we should be concerned about and keeping our eyes on to see what impact they may have?
Yeah, and thanks, Commissioner. Honestly, I really feel like these ESG bills are bills that we should really keep our eye on.
Okay.
Because I think that there are bills that have great intention and unintended consequences. And ultimately, I feel like that's a large part of my job is to say, "Okay, here's the bill, this is what it does, but these are the unintended consequences or potential unintended consequences." So I feel like a lot of those ESG bills, we may want to keep our eyes on to see what they do and then come back and work on them.
Yeah, sometimes bills take a little time to, get to the point where they're ready to go. So
Yeah.
as
agreed.
Andrew can probably tell you
Yeah,
at some point.
agreed.
Anything else? Anybody online has questions, comments? Thanks, Ginger.
Thank you.
And let me just say, we appreciate your work up on the Hill.
Thank you.
You've spent a lot of time up there as well, and without citizen involvement, that we would see a lot more of those bills that I think would cause us some concern down the road. And I'm speaking as a former legislator, as I've seen it firsthand, so. I'm
Yeah,
pointing
we
the
need our
finger a lot at
businesses up
myself.
there. Absolutely. Thanks for what you do.
Not that my former colleagues do anything intentionally, but as she mentioned, sometimes the unintentional consequences come back to haunt us after a period of time. With that, we have the opportunity to hear from our own Andrew Gruber, who spent 24/7 up on the Hill, or at least a good share of it. So keeping us in the loop on transportation, worked a lot with a former colleague of mine, Wayne Harper, and some others. So he's ready to tell us how we made out from the WFRC standpoint for transportation, how that may impact our cities, counties, and local districts.
Thank you very much, Commissioner Frohr, and former legislator Frohr and former Infrastructure and General Government Appropriations Subcommittee Chair Frohr. So when Commissioner Frohr talks about this legislative stuff, he knows of what he speaks. So thank you. And I just want to say thanks to Ginger. I think one of the things that works really well here in Utah is, in fact, the collaboration between the public sector and the private sector. I mean, that's embodied in this group right here, but in all forums, including legislatively. Ginger and I, among others, spent a fair amount of time together this session collaborating on shared priorities. Ginger mentioned a few of them, and that's one of the things that makes Utah work, is that real collaboration, not just public and private, but also urban and rural working together. And I should say, and I'm going to hit on a handful of key outcomes from the legislative session in the infrastructure space, principally transportation. But before talking about what happened in session, you really got to talk about what happened before session even started. So much good policy was developed through the process of the Utah Unified Economic Opportunity Commission, or the UEOC. Kyle Palmer directs that and just did an amazing job over the course of really the entire year in shepherding along. He probably would cringe at my saying it this way, shepherding along the governor and the speaker and the president. Commissioner Frohr served on that commission for the counties, and the WFRC chair, Don Ramsey, Mayor Ramsey, served on behalf of the cities, and again, brought together so many stakeholders. And Kyle, we were looking back at it just the other day at what were the priorities identified, at least in the space in the growth and transportation group space that we worked on. And so many of those things came to fruition and are borne out in some of the stuff I'm going to cover here briefly. So Kyle, nice job. And of course, Kyle works within the Governor's Office of Economic Opportunity. I think everybody probably knows this, but and Ryan's going to talk a little bit later, but Ryan is now the executive director of the Governor's Office of Economic Opportunities. Been there for a long time and led in Utah's economic development efforts. And now we're just so happy for you and really looking forward to continuing to partner with you, Ryan, and the office. So congratulations.
say Kyle continues to
Use your mic, use the mic if you're gonna. talk.
you too.
Kyle continues to shepherd along our staff as well, so.
It's good to have shepherds around always. So
I just call it other duties as assigned.
yeah. Anyway, so thanks for all the partnership there. So let me do a quick run through 45 days. It's really intensive. Everybody should be happy that it is only 45 days. Okay. In other places, it is much, much longer. And if anybody ever comes to you with, maybe we should lengthen the session, say no, just say no right away. Okay. 575 bills, a record, $29.4 billion budget, also a record with so much revenue coming in. But I think a really balanced approach coming out in what was the big picture buckets of investment that were made and tax cuts that were provided. What I'm going to do is I'm going to talk a little bit about funding and appropriations, and then I'm going to hit on some key legislation. There's a lot of bills. Don't worry, I'm not going to talk about all of these, but first money and then legislation. On the funding and appropriations, I think it's appropriate to start before you actually talk about what was funded, to talk about what the principles are, what lay behind the decisions for funding. All the transportation agencies in the state, the League of Cities and Towns, the Association of Counties developed these 4 shared principles for infrastructure investment a few years ago. And I'm very happy to say that all of these were adhered to and advanced by what happened legislatively this session. Number one is the simple point of investing in infrastructure. We're the fastest growing state in the nation over the past decade. We have to keep investing in our infrastructure. We have, over the past 20 years or so, we've invested more per capita than any other state in the nation in infrastructure. And we have to continue doing that. The governor has said, when infrastructure precedes growth, you have quality of life. Critical that we invest in infrastructure. Second, in transportation, we have to support multimodal transportation choices, which means we have to invest in our roadways, state and local, city and county, but we also must provide choices to people to take transit and then also to get around by what we call active transportation, biking and walking. We do not have enough room, particularly on the Wasatch Front between the mountains and the lakes, to absorb all the growth that we have coming. We can't, and this isn't just me saying this, the executive director of UDOT, Carlos Becerra, says all the time, we cannot build enough new lane miles to absorb all the transportation growth that we have coming. So we have to provide choices. Third, utilize the professional planning and prioritization process. All of the work that is done in the state's metropolitan planning organizations like WFRC, UDOT, UTA, we have this collaborative process that is data informed, that is transparent, that identifies the highest priorities and when they're needed. And what the state then has done is utilized and relied on that professional process to make decisions about what gets invested in. So it's the right way to do business. And then finally, being fiscally prudent. And what that means is not incurring debt where it's not necessary, not establishing ongoing obligations when they can't be afforded if there's an economic downturn. Those types of points, and all of those I think were advanced. So to the numbers, here's a few of the highlights in actual investment. Number one, transportation debt repayment, $800 million was appropriated for this. And I will say that I think there's no appropriation where the ratio of impact and dollars to amount it got talked about was as large as this. What I mean is this was a huge deal and it didn't get a lot of attention, I guess is the way to say it. Okay. $800 million, which will cover about roughly 3 years of debt service that UDOT is now obligated to pay on existing outstanding bonds. Not prepay, not pay off in advance because the interest rates on those bonds are really low, but just set aside money to pay for them, which has the impact critically of making funds that UDOT has otherwise available. Now they can use that for transportation projects instead of for debt service. Okay. So what that means is that the inflationary impacts that we've all seen across the construction industry, rather than that delaying projects, pushing them out further, UDOT can stay on schedule with the program that they have in place. And in fact, may be able to accelerate some projects. I actually just came here, Commissioner, from talking with about 100 or so contractors and engineers. And we know that in our private sector, you all in the private sector, you have to have certainty and stability of when the investments are going to be made in order to plan your business. And so this helps us have a stable program going forward. So that's really terrific. There's also some additional money identified potentially for future debt repayment, but that money is contingent on the performance of the economy. So there could be more. Okay, then secondly, active transportation investment. Ginger mentioned this briefly already. One-time money, $45 million. And then for the first time ever, ongoing money, $45 million every year to invest in paved trails in our communities across the state. And this was our favorite bill of the session, okay? This was a big deal. I think it is a big deal. And there's so many of you, Kent and others, that have worked so hard on making sure that we have trails that people can use, not just for recreation, not just for the dirt and mountain biking that Commissioner Ford likes to do, but also for as a means of transportation. And I see this as the kind of fork in the road moment for our state, where 5, 10, 15, 20 years from now, we will look back and say, it was so smart that we made the decision to invest in this so that people can, for air quality, for public health, just for quality of life, people can get around in a way other than driving. They can take transit, they can drive, or they can ride their bikes around their communities. And it's just the kind of community that we want Utah to be, where people are out and being active and have that opportunity. So it's just so exciting. Commuter rail, another $200 million for commuter front runner improvements, specifically at Point of the Mountain. This will cover about half the cost of a new planned station at Point of the Mountain. And I'm looking at Muriel because she's going to correct me if I say anything wrong here. And then also strategic double tracking associated with that new station going in. That is separate from the work that's being done right now to evaluate what the best approach is to do transit service through the Point site, bus rapid transit or rail service. That analysis happening. This is in addition to that. Now, because I'm just talking about state stuff here, it's not on the slide, but I do want to highlight another really big deal, federal funding. It was just announced just a few days ago in the president's budget, about $500 million for front runner strategic double tracking. This is a project that we've all been working on together. We've talked about over years here. It's identified by all of Utah's transportation agencies as the #1 priority project, infrastructure transportation project. All told, it's a $1 billion project to do strategic double tracking on front runner. The state already put $375 million in, and we all applied and hoped. And we got the good news just the other day that that $500 million is included in the president's budget. There's still steps to go through to actually secure those funds, but it pretty much means that it's going to happen, which is incredibly exciting because front runner is the spine. It's the equivalent to I-15 for the Wasatch Front, where the majority of our population lives in Utah. And by having that spine of transit function really, really well, and doing the land use and development and housing that makes sense around those front runner stations, having centers, it's embodied in the Wasatch Choice vision that we all work on, centered development around high capacity transportation. If we do that around a front runner system where the trains can go faster and be more frequent and more reliable, it is one of the best ways that we can absorb the growth that we have coming and still have great quality of life. So just super key. And we've all been working on this for years. So really exciting partnerships. Okay. Cottonwood Canyon Transportation, $150 million for transportation in the Cottonwood Canyons. Let me first start by saying what this is not. This is not funding for a gondola, okay? And the reason I say that is because the legislative intent language explicitly says that this is funding for enhanced bus service and tolling or congestion pricing and mobility hubs, which is the phase 1 of the EIS, the environmental impact statement that UDOT has developed, that Salt Lake County and others have been talking about as the common sense solutions. This is the funding for that phase 1 of that. So that's an amazing investment that's going to happen. You know, it's kind of crazy when you can talk about, you could say other transportation projects, 241 million, and just skip by that. But there's a whole bunch of other specific projects. And then specifically for our rural communities, there's money set aside to help them maintain their B and C, that's county and city roads, over time. So a lot of great stuff happened. And then I'm going to move faster now. Other growth-related appropriations, you see them on the screen, transportation corridor preservation, $500 million for water, ag optimization and water reuse. And you can see the components here. Housing and homelessness, Ginger talked about this some already, but funding associated with that. And then also, as noted already, Point of the Mountain infrastructure, utilities and roadway work. Muriel, correct? Yeah, thank you. So a lot of great stuff happening in this space. I'm going to pause. I'm going to hit really quick on a few pieces of key legislation, but I want to pause on the funding just to see if anybody has comments or questions on any of that infrastructure funding.
Any questions on the funding? Anyone online?
Yeah, I want to make sure somebody's paying attention while I'm talking to what's going on in the chat, right? So just want to make sure anybody online wants to speak up, you certainly can. Okay. Okay. A few pieces of key legislation. I mentioned this already. This is the Utah Trail Network, the active transportation funding. This was in Senate Bill 185. Senator Harper, who our chair mentioned already, this is the bill that actually sets up the process for that funding to come. Ginger talked about this also. It sets up this new active transportation investment fund with a transfer of 5% of the roadway funds annually into this active transportation fund, $45 million a year for planning, design, construction, and maintenance of that paved pedestrian system. Super exciting. SB 260, this is Senator Cullimore's bill that modifies what we refer to as the fifth. It's the 0.20 local option transportation sales tax. This means a county can impose this, has the option to, not required to, impose a local option sales tax that would be used for transportation. It was going to expire, but the imposition deadline was extended or eliminated actually. And now the funds can be used for transit and also for city and county needs. So more flexibility on that. And if you really want to know how it would work, we'll provide all these charts for you depending on which county and how all the funds flow, but I am not going to go over them right now. One more bill, HB 301, transportation tax amendments. This is Representative Schultz's bill that does a few things. For one, it gives initially temporary tax relief, reduces the motor fuel tax by 2 cents for a short period of time. But then over time, it continues to increase. Now, under current law, the increase was just going to be much more rapid because the gas tax is tied to inflation right now. And inflation's been so high that it was skyrocketing. And so Representative Schultz, I think appropriately thought, hold on, let's ease that growth, but we're still going to have it grow, but just not as fast. Okay, so it's a smoother growth. And then ultimately it actually will allow the gas tax to go a little higher than it otherwise would have under current law. So it's stability of funding over the long term. It also, and this was somewhat controversial, establishes a tax on retail electric vehicle charging. But importantly, this is not when somebody charges in their home. It's not if you have a business and the business provides chargers. It's only when, like, you go to the gas station and there's a EV charging, that there's a cost on that. Retail EV charging, they would put a percentage on. Or the way you could look at it is, it only charges this charge when there's already a charge to charge. Does that make sense? Okay, you're all really smart, so you follow that, I'm sure. And then finally, it also increases vehicle registration fees by $7. Those funds are split between the state and the cities and the counties, again, to help us maintain the infrastructure that we have in place. Here's bills I'm not going to talk about: housing and transit reinvestment zones, station area planning. I want to hit on just one more here, and that's this SB 125, Senator Chris Wilson from Logan. This bill would charge Aspire Institute at Utah State University to lead the development of a strategic master plan for transportation electrification in Utah. This is a big deal because we know that electrification is the wave of the future, but candidly, it's a little disjointed. What's the state doing? What's the private sector doing? What are transportation agencies doing? What are cities and counties doing? This will help bring together all the stakeholders to develop a master plan for how we as a state can move forward, public sector, private sector collaborating together. Whew. Okay, I'm going to stop there. There's more details in the summary, but I'm happy to answer any questions if anybody has any.
Any questions for Andrew online or in the boardroom? Andrew, great job.
Okay, thank you very much.
appreciate your work up there. The work you do is very much appreciated by quite a few of us in the city and county government. We know that we couldn't have nearly the impact without you being there for us. So
Well, right back at you, Commissioner. So thank you very much. It's a great partnership that we've got going here in Utah.
yes,
Thank you.
yes. And since Andrew brought it up, I wanted to give recognition to Kyle for the Governor's Office of Economic Opportunity. He does shepherd not only those on the staff, but those of us on the commission. I just say, when I first went on that commission, I believe that's been 2 years, 2 years ago. And coming from the legislative side, I kind of wondered if it's just another committee that didn't really do anything. And if we were spending our time worthwhile for really on issues that we could implement. And believe me, that's been a commission that's, and I take the governor for what he said was very truthful, is that this is not going to be just a sit and look pretty committee. This is going to be get the job done commission. And that's what we've done. I think this active transportation you talk about, Andrew, actually came out of that commission at some point through Carlos. So I think that the commission is paying dividends. And I can say this active transportation that Andrew talks about is a personal example in Weber County. We were able to start work on what we called the 3 Gates Trail, which is a connection between Ogden, Riverdale, and Roy that connects to a very progressive commercial area right now in Roy called Falcon Hill that goes into Davis County as well. So we were able through UDOT and then work with MIDA, acquiring the old railway, which is a right of way for future trail. And again, the trail that we have envisioned would start off with be active transportation, would be a bike, et cetera. But I know MIDA, and I sit on that board, would be great to have some type of people mover, whether that's electric transportation or what it is, to take in those 3 communities and move our 3,000 to 5,000 potential people for Northrop Grumman and other areas, other commercial areas, ventures in that Falcon Hill that would benefit from that trail. And you're going to take a lot of cars off the road. You're going to solve parking, and you're going to increase the opportunity for economic development along that trail where you could have apartments, businesses, et cetera. So it's just not about the transportation. It's about the economic development, housing, everything we talk about here that comes with that package. So I think that we're going to see a lot of bang for the buck for that 45 million. So again, I just need to brag about that a little bit. So Kyle, thanks for what you do. Next up, we have with us, I think everybody probably knows, Ryan Starks. I have to be forthright. Ryan actually comes from Ogden Valley at some point in the past.
That's right.
So
I do. Good memory.
and so he's a good what we call the Ogden Valley boys. I was there a lot farther ahead than he was, but he came in and he's been really a shining star for not only Ogden Valley, but for the state of Utah. As Andrew mentioned, he's taken over the Governor's Office of Opportunity. He's had a couple of names in the past. We look forward to working with him. And Ryan's been very good in coordinating with our local, from my perspective, with the counties and most of the cities, coordinating with economic development and make sure the state has a lead and a say in what takes place. We really have a partner with the state that I totally enjoy. That I'd say in the past, we probably haven't had quite the support. But they've done a great job. Ryan, I'll let you give any of your information you'd like to, but Ryan's here to talk about what the state's done through Governor's Office of Opportunity.
Glad you remembered that I'm a Ogden Valley boy, so we got to stick together.
Stick together, not many of us.
That's right. So it's great to see everybody, and also just wanted to thank Ginger for her remarks and just support during this session. It was really remarkable to watch her in action. And then Andrew is just a champion among champions. And so the passion, the energy, the brains, really appreciate you. I thought that I would take a moment, and I was asked, Marcia, thanks for reaching out, to just kind of highlight our organization and then kind of detail a few of the projects that we've seen in the Wasatch Front area specifically over the past number of months. So with Dan Himmert leaving, it's always a good chance to just kind of remind people who we are, what our mission is, what our name is, and what we do. So let's go ahead and start, please. So the next slide. I have a slide advancer. All right. She told me that earlier. So the name of our office is Governor's Office of Economic Opportunity. That changed from development 2 years ago to when Governor Cox was elected. He wanted to be forward thinking and more inclusive of all things economic opportunity. We're the stewards of the world's best economy and quality of life. We try to cultivate prosperity, future-proof our economy, work at the speed of business. So those are our guiding principles. Now, let me just say this. You've heard Go Ed, you've heard Go Yo, you've heard Go Utah. We're dropping the term Go Utah. So you don't have to say that anymore. So Go Utah, we found just through surveys and meeting with partners that it actually creates some more confusion for us. Because people say, oh, your Governor's Office of Economic Opportunity, GOEO, right? No, Go Utah. Well, why Go Utah? I don't know if President Mortensen's still on here or not, but maybe we should change it to Go Wildcats or something. But okay, just a little overview of our structure.
I'm sorry, Ryan. So are we
Yes.
now allowed to say GOEO? or no?
Absolutely.
We can say GOEO.
You can say GOEO.
Oh, hallelujah. Okay,
Yes.
thank you very much. Okay.
It was forbidden for 2 years, but that's no longer the case. So.
Thank you, Ken. Thank you.
And based on your action, I hope that's okay. So organizationally speaking, we have 5 different pillars from our, and I'll just read you the names of each of our managing directors. Corey Ann Edwards, who really played a big role in the session this year. She and Kyle did a great job. Pete Cadella oversees our business services team. Cameron Dalton is our managing director of operations. Jim Grover is our managing director of incentives and grants. And Vicky Varela continues to lead the Utah Office of Tourism. So just what's our vision? What's our goal? What are we trying to accomplish as an organization? So here are 10 points, and I'm not going to spend a lot of time on them, but I'm happy to answer questions after. But we really want to focus on becoming the startup state and providing the resources to small businesses. Increase capital access to businesses. Continue to support the development of our targeted industries. Excuse me. Prioritize nearshoring, enhance manufacturing capabilities, and strengthen supply chains. COVID taught us that that's something we need to focus on. Provide the tools, resources, and services to support growth and expansion of Utah companies. We do that through incentives, grants, and technical assistance. I'll also say that we do that in partnership with our friends at EDC Utah, and they play a very important role in working with us to kind of future-proof Utah's economy. One of our goals is to help develop a world-class workforce, specifically within the STEM areas, to invest into infrastructure that will lead to thoughtful development. That's where your group comes in. You've done such a wonderful job, and we appreciate that. Support rural economic development opportunities. We'll talk about that in a minute. Further Utah's global trade opportunities, and then still embrace our tourism DNA. So something that we're implementing that's kind of a shift from years past is oftentimes when a company or a community has a question, they will have to come to us. We're trying to put boots on the ground to work with our local communities on a statewide level. So we have hired a number of outreach managers who are assigned to different AOG areas. And now if you're in St. George, rather than having to come up to Salt Lake, you can visit with your local person in St. George. So we have 2 people with 2 more being hired in the next couple of weeks. And then at the end of the session, we got funding for a 5th outreach manager. So we're excited about that model. We will have somebody here for Wasatch Front Regional Council as well. Legislative recap, Ginger did a great job. Specific to our office, though, we received money for various grants and programs. Not going to spend a lot of time there. You talked about Kyle and his good work with the commission. So he absolutely helped shepherd us along. We appreciate the support of the governor and the speaker and the Senate president. We appreciate the role of Wasatch Front Regional Council and the heavy lift that you made. So as you know, it's chaired by the governor. We have cabinet members, cities and towns represented, 70 meetings, 200 stakeholders just in the past year. We have various subcommittees, including talent, women in the economy, housing affordability, and then a number of working groups as well, as you can see. Some of our wins, 19 bills that were really championed through the UEOC and turned into meaningful legislation, resulting in $390 million of one-time funding and nearly $500 million of ongoing funding. Did I get that right, or am I okay. He likes to call me out if it's his baby, the UEOC. So if I mess up, he lets me. Okay. And then it aligns with the governor's Utah Home Strategy. UEOC developed 50 policy solutions in these 19 bills that I mentioned. Excuse me. So the governor's Utah Home Strategy really focuses on growth, people, and good government, and you can see kind of the breakdown of where those bills went. So now taking a step back, looking at some big projects along the Wasatch Front area, Hill Air Force Base continues to be such a significant part of our economy. I had a good conversation with Chris Roybal this morning, and he helped provide some info, reminded me that the Hill area really pumps $7.1 billion into our economy each year. Sometimes we forget about that. It's such an important part to our northern Utah economy. Last year, Northrop completed an 850,000 square foot campus, which is just so big. And then indirectly, there are 50,000 jobs. So we go a little farther south as we think about the good work of Weber and Davis counties. Commissioner Frower and I serve on that Northern Utah Economic Alliance. They're doing some amazing things. We're seeing industrial space right now at about 2% vacancy rates in Northern Utah, which is just crazy. So there's a real demand for that. As the BDO and other spaces start to fill up, we have this West Weber mega site that has a lot of potential for continued growth. As we get into Salt Lake, the power district on North Temple, West Salt Lake is going to transform into a really meaningful economic hub for the city, especially in the west side, which we really need. Point of the Mountain, as was mentioned, $50 million went to this convergence hall, which will be kind of an accelerator or an innovation hub for the state and for USHE. Really expect some great things to happen there. You're familiar, of course, with the Utah Inland Port. They're doing some amazing work and are in some deep conversations with companies. So I was going to just show all these different kind of incented companies. I don't know if it's possible. Can you pull up a web browser? As she's doing that, remind you of our One Utah Summit, which will be up in Northern Utah, specifically at the Davis Conference Center, May 2nd. On May 1st, we're doing a little business competition. We have our website, business.utah.gov, and have a newsletter, have social channels. Would invite you to follow us. But let me just say this. So if you could go to business.utah.gov, please. We actually want to be very transparent with the companies that we incent. And so we've created a database that lists every company that's received an incentive from our office. And you'll see that the terms vary and the projects vary across the state. So if we were to go to I actually wanted to just kind of show you so that you can come back and look at some of these. So you scroll down just a little bit, please. A little bit more. And just below that. Just keep going down, thanks. Okay, so this kind of describes the EdTIF program. And then if you click the incented companies button, and then scroll down a little bit more, please. Okay, there's kind of a highlight of some of the companies. So here you go. Let's just stop there if we can, please. So this is a database of the companies that have received an economic development tax increment financing incentive. About 2/3 of the companies that we work with are Utah-based. So sometimes there's narrative that suggests that we're just focused on out-of-state companies. That's not true. We really want to focus on our current companies and help them grow. And then, of course, out-of-state companies will contact us from time to time. And we want to provide that same excellent service, whether you're in state or out of state. But we're being more targeted and choosy. We're not incenting call centers or things that add little economic value. The companies have to be aligned with our targeted industries and have to produce high-paying jobs. And just as a reminder, the incentive itself is post-performance. So we're not giving cash up front. As a company invests, we give them a small percentage of their own taxes back to the company. So we can see here some announcements of Morgan Stanley. It lists the projected number of jobs, new state wages, things like that. Duraline, T0, and the list goes on. And then, sorry, if you can just scroll up, please. The easiest way that kind of understand the story behind these numbers is on our newsroom specific to the incentives. So if you click that newsroom link right there, we do a press release and a write-up, if we kind of scroll down, please, of each of the companies that have been incented. Most recently, Texas Instruments made a significant announcement that they would expand their current facility in Utah County in the Lehigh area, 800 jobs, $11 billion. And that also doesn't take into account $3 billion to expand their current facility. So a total of 14 billion. Procter and Gamble, which is kind of one of our pioneer EdTIF recipients, recently entered into a new EdTIF to expand. And as we just scroll down a little bit more, please. There's some good things in Salt Lake, dental manufacturing company, Dandy, Orbia, Duraline. And so you can see the list there. The goal here is for you to go back and spend some time and check out some of these companies. But I think I've reached my time. Marcia, how am I doing?
Great.
Okay, so any questions for me?
Showing the teeth.
The teeth, yes.
Any questions for Ryan? Andrew, do you have a question or?
I do, if I may.
Go ahead.
Please.
Ryan, one of the questions that commonly gets asked about incentives, tax incentives, is the but-for question.
Mhm.
Like, to what extent do we or do you understand that these companies either locating or expanding here would only happen here or would not happen but for these expansions would not happen but for these incentives? Like, what's the way that we can understand or have confidence that the incentives being given are actually making a difference in the decisions that are being made for companies to locate or expand here? How do you think about that?
So this is going to sound a little backwards, but we decided to not embrace the but-for concept as much as we have in the past, because we had a lot of companies that would just feel obligated to reach out to Texas or Nevada or Arizona to get kind of a fictitious interest, maybe a letter. And so now we just go through a different process that looks at the company holistically. What type of jobs, what type of investment? Is it the right community fit? Is it aligned with our targeted industries? And if it kind of fits the Utah way, then we'll embrace that company regardless of whether or not they have an incentive from another state. We do want them to know that not everybody gets this and that they have to, follow through. So I think we're focused more on the quality and less on the quantity at this point, but yeah. So kind of a shift in our mindset. Yeah.
Additional questions? Comments? Ryan, thank you for that.
Of course. Thank you.
Thank you.
Mr. Chair, can I just mention one more thing?
Go ahead.
Sorry. Excuse
Sure.
me. Ryan, thank you very much. Super helpful. And I just want to also note that online with us today, Scott Cuthbertson, who's the
Oh, yeah.
also the newish, I don't know how, Scott, if you've moved from new to newish executive director of EDCU, the Economic Development Corporation of Utah. And I wonder, Mr. Chair, and Marcia and I were just talking about this, and Scott, if you'd be willing, maybe at our next
Talked about that, actually.
EDD meeting. Oh, great. If Scott, if you'd be willing to take a little time and talk about what EDCU is doing in this space of creating economic opportunity.
Yeah, thanks, Andrew. And I'm still newish, certainly about 6 weeks in now, but got a great team around us that's helping it be a smooth transition and great partners like Director Starks, and appreciate his presentation. I'd be happy to come and do that. We actually have a new strategy, a 5-year strategic plan that we're in process of rolling out. We got board approval from it a couple weeks ago. So I'd love to touch on that and meet the folks there. It's part of this group. So look to maybe set up something offline, but thanks for that invitation.
Thank you, Scott. And I just say that from Weber and Davis perspective with Northern Utah Economic Development, we've relied upon EDC Utah for a lot of support and really input to help us make sure that we can get closer to closing some deals in Weber and Davis County. So we look forward to that continued relationship with Scott. And since you brought up incentives, Andrew, I just wanted to say, I've been very impressed with GOIO over the past 2 or 3 years that we've been involved with economic incentives. As companies come before our counties, they obviously look first for the TIF, which deals with property tax. The next bucket of money they look for obviously is, what can the state do for me? And most of these companies are pretty aware of what the possibilities are out there before they make a decision. And I agree, Ryan has done a great job of making sure that these companies, the amount of funding, the ones that we're going to support, really fit in not only for the state, but does it fit in for the local community? Does it fit into our counties? Is it going to be a benefit to Weber, Davis, or other counties, or is it going to be a draw on somebody? So, and I think they've done a good job to make sure that the incentives are appropriate for the type of companies coming in. So thanks, Ryan. Appreciate what you do. Congratulations. Thanks. Your new job. Thank you. It's not new. Okay. Any other questions before we move on? Covered.
What's that, Kyle? You want one more sticker?
Yeah. Grab that stickers for Kyle before.
I had 4 to start.
Yeah, wow. Okay. For some reason, they disappeared. All right. I mentioned earlier, as we started this meeting, about our 5-year SIDS program, what was taking place there, the progress we've made. And I think it's appropriate that we have an opportunity to get an update from our folks here that are putting that together for us. I'm going to turn the time over to Marcia White to really tell the story of what they're doing, where we've been, and more importantly, where we're going on this 5-year plan. And I mentioned before, I've been very impressed with the work I've seen come out of our consultants so far. And I think at the end of the day, the product that we're going to show for the state of Utah and economic development is going to be very beneficial. So with that, Marcia, I'm going to turn the time over to you.
I'll try to be very brief. I just want to thank everyone who has participated in our focus groups. As you know, we set forth and just threw you on some focus groups, and I thank you for participating. The second part of that is that these guys have also been working not just with the 5 focus groups that were in my brainchild head, but they also have met with a diverse group of individuals through our, I can't ever remember what, community advisory council, I think.
That was the Ogden Youth Council.
Yeah, and then the Ogden Youth Council. And so, and then they've done a series of one-on-one interviews as well. So I don't want to talk too much other than thank you for that time that you've done. We are into the next phase, if you will. We're looking at, I think I've mentioned that the EDA has very specific things that we have to put in our SEDS. And the next phase is the strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, and threats. But these guys have come up with a really better way to look at that, what we're doing well and what we're not doing great with, or something like that. So with that, I'm going to turn the time over to Trina, Eric, and Ryan, and lead us through. It's not near as fun as $26 billion of funding, but go for it.
apologies for those who are looking at me on the camera here. I have like a lot of lens flare going on behind me. So I'll try to position myself appropriately. We're so grateful that we can meet with all of you and for all of the amazing news and reports that are going on. This region is really, really succeeding in so many ways. And as an economic development advisor, this is really a special opportunity for our firm. We're homegrown, we travel the country, and so it's really nice to actually say, hey, you know, we can do some work in our own backyard. We were started in Ogden, and since then we've been working across the country from Oregon to Maine. And so I'm just gonna give a quick update on where we're at in the process and then what we foresee as the next steps. And before I do that, maybe I'll just introduce my team members here who are with me. The first one is Ryan England. He's the president of the company. And you're from Utah, right? And he's just a couple blocks away, so he got a short walk here until the rain showed up, and then he took transit, which is a timely issue for us. And then on my other side is Trina Kittleson, and she's going to be the one who's really riding the bulk of this report. And you've probably seen her fingers going a million miles an hour there with all of the great information that that was all shared today. So we're about halfway through the SEDS process. We've done several interviews. Trina, if you can pull the numbers here for me, we have interviewed how many people so far?
Yeah, so in those 6 groups that Marcia just mentioned, there were 28 participants plus an additional 9 in the Ogden Youth Council.
And now we're moving on to individual interviews. So all of you who are still online, thanks for holding out. I know that we're kind of right near the end of the agenda here. Please raise your hand and we'll make sure to capture you if you're interested in still being interviewed with us. If you haven't participated in one of those focus groups, we'd love to make sure that we capture everyone who's still interested and who still wants to participate, make sure their voice is heard. And we'll continue to push for more interviews. I think we promised Marcia 60. So we're more than halfway there, but we're still wanting to capture a lot more information. Now for the SWOT, I think that we're gonna pivot a little bit from what we had told Marcia, and we're gonna do it offline after this meeting, and we'll just drive it that way. I'm not sure how many of you have participated in the SWOT meeting before, but there has been times where you spend 45 minutes deciding if something is really an opportunity or a strength, and that's absolutely not the approach we want to take here. You're very welcome. And so what we'll do is we'll send out a survey to each of the members of the committee and make sure that they're able to have sufficient time to respond. And how we want to approach it is that you'll have 2 actions that you'll take for each of these prompts that we'll give you. The first is kind of a pulse. You know, how much do I agree with that statement that is being provided? And then second, some reasoning behind that pulse, so that we'll get some qualitative measures as well as some quantitative measures. So I'll be sending that out shortly after this meeting, but we wanted to be hyper aware of everyone's time here and make sure that we are able to close when we're supposed to.
Can I just add one item? This relates to the need for a lot of input. When we talk to the high school students, one of the questions we ask is that you're now the mayor, the city council is going to vote anything you want to do, $1 billion. What do you want to do it with? What would you expect? First one we asked, he said, I would buy homeless shelters and I would buy some training for those folks. And I would also work on drug rehab. So, you know, our hands are in good shape in the future. We want to hear about more of that.
Want us to go through the at all, or do you?
I might be incorrect in the time allotment that I saw, but I saw that we were running about 20 minutes to close, and we want to make sure that we have enough space that everyone can really dig into those responses and have time to respond.
You share with them a little bit more about what that would look like. I mean, as far as when we send that out to them. Yeah, maybe a preview. How's that?
Yeah, happy to do that.
And then that way we can be ready when it comes.
Good idea.
A 5-minute preview. 4 minutes and 59 seconds now.
All right, so great. I'm glad that I can see my own screen here. There's a good feedback loop here. So this is the first question that we'd ask here. I have a good understanding of the Wasatch Choice vision and how it intends to impact my community. And so what we would expect from each participant, and we'll put this into the survey tool that we send out to all the committee members, is that you put, for example, 4 as kind of your pulse, 1 being strongly disagree and 5 being strongly agree, and then a short statement of why. And we'll capture all of those and share that out next time when we visit and present on our findings from that SWOT.
That was- When do you think they can expect that email to go out?
Trina, how soon would you be able to put that together? Or Victoria, yeah. Yeah, we'll put it together immediately and send it out by tomorrow.
Marcia can keep us posted on that.
Yep.
As far as what's going on.
Yeah, we just want to be aware of everyone's time and make sure that people are able to hop off when they need to.
And let me just add, so the rankings, the 1 to 5, that's what we're going to use as the basis for whether you see it as a strength or as a weakness or opportunity or threat. And then the comments section, we hope you take advantage of those. They're not going to be required. So if you don't really have a lot of thoughts on something, you don't have to, and you can continue through the survey. But any comments you give, we're going to really digest them and put them into our analysis. So. Thank you.
Great, good to hear. Does that conclude your presentation?
Yeah.
Anything else?
Can I just, sorry, one more thing. So one of the other things that they've been actively doing is putting together analytics. And at some point in time, we'll get those out as well. I think that the last time we all met, there was a lot of analytics that came out of the statewide SEDS. And so it might be of benefit to start throwing some of those things out as well. Ted, you and I have looked through those, and just a very interesting view on each individual county. So anyways, I thought that would be another interesting thing.
Great. Anything else?
Mr. Chair, can I ask one quick
ahead.
clarification? So this survey will be intended for the ED to take, right? Not to be broadcasted widely. Okay.
Yeah, we'll be for the EDD members.
Okay. And there's other outreach going to other groups. So just not to forward it on and yeah.
Absolutely. Thank you so much, Megan.
Great, good question. Okay.
If I
anything
may,
else,
Chair,
Kent?
yeah, just follow up one more question as
Go ahead.
maybe it's been answered, but just to clarify, so when this data comes back, we'll be able to be seen county specific.
Yeah, I can pull that up real quick and give everyone a quick preview of what she's talking about. Happy to
Use
do that.
Davis County.
But yes, we've pulled data at the county level, and for Salt Lake County especially, we pulled for several of the communities. So we could get a really good view of all the communities, because Draper is larger than Morgan County's entire population. And so to say, this is the county, this is the economy is very much not a good way of analyzing your economic data.
Well, and I think too specifically to those SWOTs, some will be strengths, in other counties, there'll be weaknesses. And so being able to see that specific by county would be helpful.
Okay,
While he's pulling that up, I think the other thing about that data is that it's readily available. It's not, we don't have to, well, I guess there's a few that might not be readily available, but for the most part, it's census data and, things that we can get.
Yeah, absolutely. And I'm sharing it right here. So once it loads up, I can show you all the different pages, but this is already hosted online. So with the surveys, we'd be happy to send out some of these dashboards that we've built. The intent behind this is to get a really great analysis of the communities and the counties. And then, as you had mentioned, to build that into the SWOT analysis that we're going to be conducting. Yeah, it's
okay, we're
going
waiting
a
for
little
this. There we
slow
go.
Eric, is it true that, so there will be certainly this questionnaire, but then the data itself can be parsed out that you provide with the questionnaire, and maybe that's an especially useful place for us to start to understand geographic differences? Is that true?
Yes, and my proposal to Marcia is that unlike the previous SEDS document, is that we host the majority of the data that we're going to be publishing on an online format like this, so that it can be self-updating and that we can continue to provide up-to-date information I know that that's something that we were tasked to do last year, was to do the SEDS annual update. And a lot of the data were there, but we had to go searching for it in order to renew it. And so if we can post it online and have that, the queries for the data pre-built, then that's going to make that process really easy. And I think it's a lot more relevant to the communities themselves, because we can do it at the community level and allow for that data to be updated as soon as the ACS data is dropped, rather than having to wait, until that next year's SEDS update before you can see the data on your community.
I don't remember what. You just show them the Hockman Index.
Yes, I'd be happy
Many
to.
of us are very familiar with the Hockman Index from a statewide side, and so they've developed it and used it more as a county level, and then does it get to the city level as well? No.
No, the data aren't available at the city level because it's using BLS as the backbone for that one, Bureau of Labor Statistics. But I've done it for not only the industry, as you see on this page, but also on the.
One of you summarize what it is? if you're gonna
Yeah,
talk about it.
absolutely. The Hockman Index is a measure of diversity between industries. And in the first example that I just switched away from, that figure, it shows a similarity of a subject unit of geography to another comparison unit of geography. So the Kempsey Gardner Institute, they developed this in the University of Utah. This is an index that they created, and we're happy to partner with them to develop that for this dashboard, these dashboards as well. And we've done it not only for the industry, which is going to be how many employees, but also for GDP. And that's what this output measure is showing here is what is the level of diversity in GDP for Salt Lake County versus the state of Utah. And a high number, so 100% or 100 would mean that the county's mix of industries, or in this case, output, is the exact same as what Utah's mix is. And then a lower number means that there's some disparity or differences between those two.
And perhaps stating the obvious, generally speaking, having a high Hockman Index is good. It's a measure of economic diversity and therefore resiliency to changing economic conditions or exogenous shocks like I don't know, pandemic or something like that.
Potentially, I would say, for example, in Utah County, they probably have a much larger tech sector than for the state as a whole. And I wouldn't say that county's economy is better off if they lose those jobs and then it becomes more like the state of Utah. So it's a number that we want to look at, but also within context. So,
Yeah, fair
all
enough.
else being equal, I would say yes.
Yeah,
and higher index numbers better.
More from a statewide perspective, having a higher economic diversity is positive. And then when you get down to county by county, and maybe perhaps it gets a little, it's a kind of a different question as you're noting.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. So there's 16 pages here with a little intro one. So we'll send out all the links here. You can see in this little list all of the data that we've pulled, and we're going to be leveraging this as the data backbone of our study.
Just to add, as you look at the dashboard, in case, because sometimes people will say, well, where's this data coming from? The question mark at the top left corner, if you click on that, it'll just pop up the source. So you can see the difference between the ACS data and the BLS data and know what the source is behind that.
Good to know. Any additional questions, comments? Okay, thank you very much for that presentation. We look forward to receiving that, then seeing the data is after you've had a process. Before we go on to other business, I'd like to give the opportunity to our committee vice chair, Mayor Nguyen, if you'd like to add anything or have any additional comments before we go to other business. The time's yours.
Thank you so much. We've heard a lot of really good information today. Thanks for everyone that has worked so hard at the legislature. This was one of those years that I did not make it up to the Capitol, at least not even one day this year, but I joined many meetings online. It's just a busy time. But so thank you for representing us and helping us out as cities. I appreciate you all so much. Thank you.
Thanks, Mayor, for being online and being part of the committee. Appreciate you very much. All right, let's go to other business. Anyone that would like to voice any comments, questions from the committee online or in the room? Now's the time to do that. Go ahead.
Did Laura give an update on what their next steps were on the statewide SEDS after the somewhat lukewarm feedback she got, which was still so much more positive than Mountain Lands. Evidently, we're nicer than they are.
I just saw her this morning. She is reading the statewide SEDS. I don't know what it's really called. I never can. Unified Plan for Economic Development, I think is the plan name. The consultants are done with it. They have a product in hand that Laura is reading right now. So more to come with that. Oh, thank you. Laura Hanson from
Laura
GOP.
Hanson, yeah. That's
Thank
it.
you. I just assume everyone knows and they don't. You're correct.
Most of us do, but not
Yeah,
everyone.
thank you. So that's where we're at. Thank you. Yeah, it's his fault. Yeah, cool. Just real quick, I think a couple of things. We start these meetings and I might also include in our survey, we start these meetings at 1:15 in order for people that want to do a transit get here. So I don't know if that's kind of a weird time for everyone. So I will send out a note and see if that works for everyone still. And then I hope that we've actually programmed out now adding Scott into our programming out to discuss EDCU stuff. But we hope that this is helpful for people to get this information. Maybe a lot of you already know it, but I think it's really information is power and hopefully this is working for you. If not, please reach out to me and tell me we need to go in a different direction. So.
I might just supplement that briefly. Alan, I'm looking over at you and thinking how I briefly mentioned water investments and just skimmed past something that I don't know a lot about. Darren, we touch on education briefly. We at WFRC are more in the built environment, the transportation space. We touch into housing, but obviously there's a relationship in addressing our growth, planning for our growth in all of these. And so if folks want, and if you guys want, or others want to contribute, at future meetings about what's happening in water or education or workforce as it all ties together, then I personally, Mr. Chair and Vice Chair, if you folks would be interested in that, we could draw on some of the expertise we have here on the committee as we go forward.
Absolutely. Yeah. Yeah. And I was going to say, again, give thanks to everybody here in the room and those online. We have really a committee of folks here from different areas, different backgrounds, different expertise, and we value all your opinions. And as we look for putting together the agenda items, we try to come up with ideas that will probably be most beneficial to the majority. But if you have something that you would like to cover uniquely for your county, your city, your industry, education, whatever it is, feel free to reach out to Marcia. We would like to have those comments. But more than anything, just appreciate your expertise in being here, taking your time out of your day to be part of this committee, because I think what we do at the end of the day does get passed down through our cities, counties, industries, and hopefully will pay dividends in the future. So with that, any other business, any other comments? Now's the time to do that. Coming to the end of our time frame. Okay, well, we're not quite done yet because we have the opportunity under the Utah Public Meeting Act that we're required to do on an annual basis. Make sure everybody's now, I'm assuming probably most people in this room have watched that video, but in case you haven't, and those online, I'm sure will stay online to watch that video. I just have good faith in you. Anyway, that's coming up after we adjourn. But what I would look for is a motion to adjourn after that becomes effective after the video is played. So not all of us have to stay here for those that have actually experienced this video. And it's a very great video if you haven't seen it. Yeah, it's a great video. And if you haven't seen it once, you need to see it 3 or 4 times just to make sure you get your nap. So yeah, I didn't see it on the Oscars. So what I'm looking for is a motion that would make it official. We adjourn upon completion of the video, which is a little unusual, but that's what we need to do. So those that don't have to, that have seen the video don't have to stay here. So I'd look for that motion right now. Okay, we got a motion. Do we have a second? We do have a second. Ginger, thank you very much. All those in favor? Say aye. Any opposed? We're now adjourned after the video. And now Rosie's going to put that in place. Again, thanks very much for your attendance today, folks.
So what's the Open and Public Meetings Act? It's the state law that ensures government actions and deliberations are openly conducted. Before we continue, keep in mind that this video is an overview, and exceptions may exist based on your entity type. So what's considered an open and public meeting? It's when a governing body majority meets to discuss or act upon government business. It includes the meetings sometimes referred to as workshops or executive sessions. Regular meetings, public hearings, electronic meetings, and emergency meetings are all open and public meetings. Open and public meetings don't include chance or social meetings. A public hearing is a type of open and public meeting where citizens have a reasonable opportunity to speak. Public hearings happen when a government adopts a budget or imposes or increases taxes or fees. An electronic meeting is a type of open and public meeting that's convened electronically, such as via phone or the internet. Remember, the governing body must adopt a resolution, rule, or ordinance allowing and governing electronic meetings. An open and public meeting may be closed to discuss any of the following: a person's character, competence, or health, security personnel, devices, or systems deployment, collective bargaining, litigation, purchase, sale, or lease of property if an open discussion would prevent the entity from completing the transaction on the best terms, investigations of criminal misconduct, and private or protected information per the Utah Procurement Code, including trade secrets. 2/3 of the governing body need to vote yes to close a meeting. Quick math lesson. 2 divided by 3 equals 66.7%. Let's say your governing body has 5 members. If 3 out of the 5 members vote yes, that equals 60%, which is not equal to or greater than 66.7%, which means you're 1 member short and instead need 4 out of 5 members to vote yes. During a closed meeting, a governing body can't interview someone applying to fill an elected position, discuss filling a midterm vacancy or temporary absence, discuss the character, competence, or health of a person whose name was submitted for consideration to fill a midterm vacancy or temporary absence, or approve any ordinance, resolution, rule, regulation, contract, or appointment. If a closed meeting is discussing a person's character, competence, or health, or security personnel, devices, or systems deployment, no recording or minutes are required. However, the presiding member needs to sign a sworn written statement stating such. If the closed meeting is held for any other reason, a recording must be made. Emergency meetings may be held to discuss an urgent matter due to unforeseen circumstances. In order to hold the meeting, the best notice that's feasible is provided of the time, location, and topics to be considered. An attempt is made to contact all governing body members, and a governing body majority approves the meeting. Entities that hold regular meetings need to provide notice at least annually of the year's meeting schedule. As always, the notice must include date, time, and place. For entities that don't hold regularly scheduled regular meetings, 24 hours notice must be provided. All meetings, whether regularly scheduled in advance over the course of the year or scheduled as needed, must provide no less than 24 hours notice of meeting agendas. If a public hearing is held, public notice requirements change. Make sure to distinguish between regular meeting notice requirements and public hearing notice requirements. For regular meetings, an entity is only required to notify a newspaper and doesn't need to pay to publish a notice. For public hearings, notice must be published in at least one issue of a newspaper. If a newspaper of general circulation isn't available, written notice is posted in 3 public places within the entity's boundaries. Regular meetings require 24 hours notice. Public hearings require 7 days notice. For both regular meetings and public hearings, written notice must be posted at the principal office of the governing body, or, if no such office exists, at the building where the meeting will be held. Governing bodies must also provide notice of open and public meetings on the Public Notice website at publicnotice.utah.gov. By posting on the website and providing the email of the local newspaper, Governing bodies can also meet the requirement to notify a newspaper. However, other requirements such as publishing in a newspaper still apply. Typically, posting on the public notice website is done by the records officer, recorder, or clerk. However, it's the governing body's responsibility to ensure notice is provided. State Archives has prepared a training manual and quick guide for owners and posters, as well as training videos that can be accessed at their website at archives.utah.gov. If your entity is increasing a fee or undergoing truth in taxation for a property tax increase, be aware that there are additional notice and posting requirements. Public meeting agendas need to include reasonably specified topics to be considered, with each topic listed under a separate agenda item on the meeting agenda. The governing body may not consider a topic in an open meeting that wasn't on the agenda. If a new topic not on the agenda is raised by the public during an open meeting, the governing body may discuss the topic. However, final action may not be taken on the new topic during that meeting. Meeting minutes and an audio recording are required for all open meetings, with limited exceptions. When an open or closed meeting is required to be recorded, it must be unedited and contain all the portions of the meeting. Recordings of open meetings must be made available within 3 days. Every entity needs to establish procedures for the governing body's approval of minutes. Pending minutes are written minutes prepared in draft form and are subject to change before being approved by the governing body. Pending minutes must contain a clear indication, such as a draft or pending watermark, that the governing body hasn't yet approved the minutes and that they're subject to change. Pending minutes must be made available within 30 days. Approved minutes are written minutes of a meeting that have been approved by the governing body. Approved minutes are the official record of the meeting and must be made available within 3 business days. Whoever is responsible for taking the minutes during meetings, typically the records officer, recorder, or clerk, needs to be familiar with what OPMA requires be contained in the minutes. When a governing body closes a meeting, the following must be publicly announced and entered into the minutes of the open meeting at which the closed meeting was approved. The reason or reasons for holding the closed meeting, the location where the closed meeting will be held, and the vote of each member of the governing body either for or against the motion to close the meeting. The recording and any minutes must include the date, time, and location of the meeting, the names of the governing body members present and absent, and the names of all others present except where disclosure would infringe on the confidentiality necessary to fulfill the original purpose of closing the meeting. For more information, access our local government resource center at resources.auditor.utah.gov.